hello again. In this video, I am going to be focusing on giving you a little bit of an introduction to the Mural board or the virtual whiteboard that the Theory of Change module leverages, and also giving you sort of an overview of the workshop introduction when you're in running the workshop, how you get the whole team sort of aligned and getting started. And I will note that most of the rest of these videos, at least for sure, like numbers 2 through 10, are really designed for people who are planning to facilitate the Theory of Change module. So hopefully that's you. They're short and sweet, and there are a lot of them, but they're very focused. So hopefully that makes them easier to navigate and find what you're looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the mural. Okay, so quickly to just orient you, and I should say you can find a link to this mural board in the manual/facilitator guide on the Conservation by Design website, and also in a number of other locations. But just to orient you a bit to what you're seeing. So there's different elements here. There's a sort of introduction. There's a part 1 that's called context setting, part 2, tracing the theory of change logic, and then part 3, drafting intermediate results, as well as a closing section. And then also off to the right, you can see there's sort of a template for a theory of change format, which you can use to sort of fill that out as you're going through the workshop, or that's how it's intended anyway. And then along with each, so I guess I should say that the day 1 is meant to be, if you're following the workshop structure as designed, day 1 should be the introduction and context setting. Day 2 is part 2. Day 3 includes drafting intermediate results and closing. And at the beginning and end of each day, there's also sort of like a little suggested space for doing an intro icebreaker moment, as well as like a little closing moment each day. So you'll find those sprinkled throughout. But I'm going to zoom in on where it says start here, which is hoping we're hoping you'll start as well. And this is just a little orientation to how to read the board and how to use it. Basically, it has a little overview of the structure, which I kind of just talked through, but part 1, part 2, part 3 goes into a little more detail about sort of the different elements covered on each day. There's some tips for you on how to use this virtual whiteboard if you're not as used to facilitating in Mural or Miro or something similar. But we, for this workshop, recommend, especially for a virtual group, a participant group size of about 5 to 12 people. Any more than that, and it gets difficult to make sure that everyone has a voice and everyone is engaged. But also, hopefully, that leaves enough room for you to have a range of different diverse perspectives included. The navigation in the board, generally, you're going to move left to right and top to bottom. You'll notice throughout the workshop that we use voting in a lot of different places. One thing I really want to emphasize is that voting is a great way to quickly see where the group's energy is and where there's maybe initial consensus, but it's not the best way to reach a final decision. Oftentimes what gets voted on is sort of a nonsensical group of things, or maybe something repetitive gets included, or et cetera, et cetera. So we really recommend that you use voting, but you use it as a way to launch a group discussion or generate a useful conversation that can then drive consensus. Taking breaks, this is sort of Facilitator 101, but as a reminder, rule of thumb, this is a long workshop. We really recommend making sure you go no longer than 90 minutes without giving folks a break, especially virtually. It's just really hard for people to maintain attention looking at a screen for that long. And then finally, mind the clock. Setting a time limit on discussion can really help you keep the conversation flowing. And we have these sort of suggested timeframes sprinkled throughout. They're very much just a rule of thumb. Actually, if you were to strictly follow the times, you would probably end early. But things never take as little time as you hope they would. So if you don't follow these, could take forever to get through the workshop. So you know, hopefully those are a useful tool for you. So a few different roles. Participants, we use that term to refer to sort of the core working group attending the workshop, who's collaborating to draft the theory of change together. Decider is a term I use a few times. This is usually the team lead or whoever sort of the project sponsor is. But if the group is stuck or needs to quickly reach a consensus, the decider can be a really useful partner to you as a facilitator. You can choose to give them a few minutes to make a suggestion or decision, give the rest of the group a break, or bring the decider together with a small core group to do a synthesis moment. Or, there's a bunch of different ways you can sort of leverage this decider role to help you move forward through the workshop if the group gets stuck. And facilitator, that's you. Your role is to guide the group through instructions in the board, try to help balance out the different voices in the room. Certain folks have a tendency to take more space than others. And so the more you can really keep an eye on that on behalf of the group and balance out the voices as best you can, that's a really helpful role that you can play. And also just keeping the group flowing and moving. As I mentioned, this workshop is really trying to move you through a lot of different discussions pretty quickly. And it can feel uncomfortable, honestly. It's 7 different elements of the theory of change that we take between 9 and maybe a few more hours to complete. And so the pace is pretty, by nature, has to be pretty quick. And that can, I think also maybe sometimes there's a tendency to want to get everything perfect in the moment during the workshop. If you sense the group moving into wordsmithing mode, or that a discussion has sort of diminishing returns, or maybe the group is, stuck on a particular point that doesn't feel like it's the most important point. It is a key role that you can play to spot those moments and encourage the group to move forward, even if they aren't perfectly aligned yet. And then throughout the board, you'll see these yellow dots. The light yellow ones have sort of the main core instructions that you can use as a starting point for your own facilitation guidance to the team. They are suggestions, so please take with what feels right to you and adjust it for the circumstances of the workshop you're running. And then the dark yellows have just some extra facilitation tips for how to help think through different prompts. The red stickies are places where you might want to actually go in and customize something ahead of the workshop. So we actually recommend that you review those and delete them before the workshop starts. Okay, that was a lot. But what I'm going to do is really quickly walk you through the introduction sequence for if you're starting the Theory of Change workshop day 1 with your participants in the room. How do you kind of get them moving forward with the right context? So there's a little panel here where you can kind of fill out the high-level details of why we're here, a moment to sort of put some objectives. What are we trying to achieve with this workshop? What team is this for, et cetera. Some of those basics are really useful and grounding. A little bit of context about the theory of change. This is very high level. If you watched my previous video on, what a theory of change is and why it matters, this is the 30-second version. But one thing that's really important to emphasize is that, we often talk about this workshop goal as sort of trying to reach a 60 to 70% first draft of a theory of change, which might feel unsatisfying to people. But again, for one thing, there's no such thing as a perfect theory of change, 100% perfect theory of change. The theory of change is by nature a model or a hypothesis. And so it's never going to be perfect. We're working on complex, capital C complex problems in a really uncertain environment, which is the world of today. Some of the feedback we heard from folks when we were going into the creation of this module is, hey, it takes us so long to create a theory of change that by the time we finish it, it's out of date already. And so what we've really tried to do is help you create a full first draft quickly that might need some adjustment after the workshop, but it's not so precious that you don't feel like you can't keep editing it and working on it and reflecting on it over time. So that's the hope. A little bit about, this can be like a helpful orientation to just, ask for the group's patience and sort of set the right tone in the room that, what we're trying to do with this workshop is balance out the need to, move quickly because people's time is precious and have the spaciousness to have the conversations that need to be had. And so we're never going to find the perfect balance, and we're going to try to, our best to find the right balance as close as we can. So this panel talks just at a high level a little bit about the overall process. So 1 and 2 are about like drafting the theory of change. 3 is about creating a simple MEL plan, and 4 is about using all of that to go on and support adaptive implementation. And so situating the group in that sort of that context, that this is the context in which these modules have been designed. So that can be helpful. And then this is just an example theory of change, which you've already seen if you've seen my previous video on why theories of change matter, but also some definitions. And then these team agreements, these are ones that we sort of suggest and have drafted for you, but feel free to change these up, potentially even consider co-creating with the team in real time if that feels important to you. Yeah, feel free to have fun with those. And then, this is sort of a bit of a parking lot type area, but feel free to use this to sort of capture ideas or threads of conversations that don't feel settled during the theory of change workshop, but the team can choose to pick those up again after if they want. And then this introduction space, we really recommend like starting with some kind of introduction or icebreaker moment, just because you will be spending a lot of time with this team during the workshop. And the earlier you can get folks talking and participating, the more likely they will be to see this as a participatory environment. And so we have a suggested icebreaker in here for you, but feel free to do with it whatever you want. And then finally, this is just an added space in case the team lead has context about, why are we creating a theory of change? Why right now? What is the theory of change about? Like any special considerations the team needs to consider as they go into the workshop. This is a totally appropriate space for any type of context like that feels useful. All right, so that's the whole introduction sequence for the Theory of Change workshop. And in future videos, I'll be getting into the content of creating a theory of change itself. See you soon.